Samsung's Q90T and Q95T televisions are among the flagship the South Korean manufacturer has to offer. Here I'm reviewing the Q95T, however the same would apply to the 90T. In terms of the differences between the two TVs, it's pretty simple. The 95T is available across UK and Europe for around £1,400, and that includes the One Connect box, a separate box allowing you to connect up all your peripherals or indeed all your inputs that you need via a separate box rather than having to connect at the back of the TV. The Q90T, however, which is available in the US for £1,300 and in the UK for £1,200, doesn't have the box and therefore means that you essentially connect everything at the back of your TV, making for a little bit more of a cluttered experience if you're going to be wall mounting the TV, although it wouldn't be a problem for something of a setup that I have, which is placed on a cabinet. Now, before jumping into this detailed review, if you do have Instagram, I'd very much appreciate a follow. It's at TotallyDubbed, and yes, that's a shameless plug. And if you have any interest in looking at the news or reviews of electric or hybrid vehicles, do check out Totally EV. Your support would be equally appreciated. So let's kick things off and talk about the build quality and design. Now, the TV I'm reviewing is a 55-inch model. However, it's available in a variety of different sizes and thus will depend on your dimensions. If you're interested in about the dimensions, do check it out on Samsung's website. The links will be down in the description below. What I will say is across all the models, they have the same sort of stand, which is very much a pleasurable sight, purely because Samsung has gotten rid of the kind of bar that they used to have at the front of the TV, whereby it made it a little bit more awkward to place, let's say, slimline soundbars in front of it. That's not the case with the new line Q90 and Q95T TVs, and it's nice to see that Samsung has adopted this. Furthermore, the stand itself is very sturdy and I've got no issues whatsoever. Of course, you can wall mount this TV with a compatible VESA stand, so if you do want to do that, that's an option for you to do, and the wall mounting brackets are just at the back of the TV. Now, in terms of connectivity, this will of course depend if you've got the 95T or the 90T, but the connections themselves are identical across the two models, apart from where you actually connect it. As I mentioned before, be it in the One Connect box or at the back of the TV. Here you'll find an aerial input, as you might expect from a TV. You've got a LAN input in order to access internet connectivity in terms of a wired input to your router. You've got one singular HDMI 2.1 port, and we'll talk about the importance of having only a singular one in comparison to having four HDMI 2.1 inputs, and instead you're treated with three HDMI 2.0 inputs, and one of which here is an ER compatible input as well. Now, aside from that, you've got optical and two USB ports as well. The USB ports are to deliver a little bit of extra power. So for example, if you have a Chromecast like I do, this allows you to essentially power the device without having to connect it into the wall. Now, there's also wireless connectivity. You've got Bluetooth here to choose from and Wi-Fi. The latter is quite important because it allows you to set up the TV via your smartphone, but essentially the Wi-Fi compatibility also means that it's quite useful for you decluttering your wires. Let's say if you've got a compatible Samsung soundbar, one of the more flagship models which also support Wi-Fi, it means you can have a Wi-Fi essentially uninterrupted and pretty much a lossless type of connection between the soundbar and the TV, which is always a plus point in my books. Now, next up is the remote you get included. As you can see on the right hand side, you've got the more traditional layout, while the newer remote is very much sleek. Now, the remote is very much similar to Samsung's older line. However, you might notice there is an extra line of buttons over here. Now, this is really much nitpicking, but I really don't like the inclusion of these buttons being placed here because it's the first place where your thumb is going to end up. And often I want to find myself adjusting the volume and channel rather than accessing Netflix or Prime Video. So this is just my preference, but I wish these buttons were reorganized. Otherwise than that, the remote is very nice, lightweight, and does last quite a long time. At least I can say this from experience, and even has the voice assistants built in as well, where you can access, let's say, Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa directly from your remote and perform voice commands. So now we get onto the menu system that's found on the TV. Now, what I will say, it's very comprehensive. You've got lots of apps to choose from, and it does look pretty fluid. It doesn't look basic at all. The only thing is that sometimes it gets a bit laggy, and after you use it for a little while, you might find yourself cursing at the Tizen OS, at least what I have done in the past. If you were to scroll down, what you'll find is even more options over here. And personally, while they do look pretty aesthetically pleasing, I don't like the fact that each time you were to go down on the menu system, it would pause, let's say, whatever you're watching, be it, let's say, a YouTube video to even live terrestrial TV. Nevertheless, there's a few different things such as ambient mode, which if you want to enable, and you've also got the settings. Now, going into the settings, what I will say is that your settings might vary depending on what you watch. So don't take my things as the golden standard. But this is what I use, and this is what I found uses the best sort of image quality, at least to my eyes and in terms of my tests. I have the standard mode selected in terms of the picture mode, and in terms of the expert settings, while I've got brightness set at 0, normally I set it around 17 to 20 depending on my ambient lighting conditions. I leave the rest of them on normal, and I leave the picture quality clarity section to either off or use it on custom depending on what I'm actually watching or, let's say, playing. As for local dimming, this will affect the blooming effect that you get. On low, you will get it the least. On standard, there's a little bit more. And while on high, you will notice it even more. So if you watch a lot of dark content and you have, let's say, lots of bright light conditions kind of zooming across screen, take, for example, a black screen with a white mouse, then you'll notice a lot more blooming effect on the high local dimming mode. However, this does have a really positive effect on terms of HDR content, and therefore if you want to really benefit from the best HDR content, leave local dimming on high. As for contrast enhancer, I leave it on low. Of course, again, depending on what type of content you watch, but I found high feels a little bit too artificial. The color tone I leave on standard, or indeed move it to warm if I want a little bit more of a warmer sort of color tone, as the name might suggest, although standard seems a little bit more accurate. I leave the rest at default and make sure the color space set to native. Now, moving past the picture modes, you've then got the sound settings. Now, this has got the built-in TV speakers, and of course, if you've got other devices connected, they will show up over here. But it's worth bearing in mind that you will probably want to stay on the standard mode because Amplify seems to distort the bass and just makes it sound a little bit odd. The expert settings will give you some equalization settings and indeed allow you to see how the thing is connected, and you've also got Dolby Atmos compatibility, which you'll want to enable if you have a Dolby Atmos enabled device such as a soundbar. The only thing worth bearing in mind in this sound quality section is the fact that if you were to use the intelligent mode, so for example Adaptive Sound Plus, this will disable your EQ function and allow it to have its own intelligent EQ, something you might want to use. Now, going back into the general section, there are some other modes that you will want to enable. So now just disabling intelligent mode, because you might want to enable adaptive picture as well if you want kind of a no frills approach and the best sort of picture and let the TV decide. You've got the voice assistant settings that you can enable or disable over here. You can see I've got Google Assistant, network setting as the name might suggest, system manager, and then external device manager. This is probably one of the most important modes over here because we're going to talk about game mode setting and indeed the input signal plus. Now, input signal plus I'd very much suggest enabling through across all the HDMI inputs if you have them, of course, and indeed enabling game mode. Of course, you can see it's blacked out over here because I'm on the BBC app, but if I have an HDMI connection, then this mode will become enabled, and you can see over here on your right hand side, you've got the game mode, surround sound, dynamic black equalizer, and game motion plus. Truthfully, the Game Motion Plus does actually make a difference, and you can see from your image over here when I had my PC connected over and playing Counter-Strike, you can see that the Game Motion Plus actually does a positive effect in terms of how to deal with the overall image. Of course, your mileage may vary depending on what you're using it, but what I'm trying to say over here is this option is going to be very much pivotal for gamers out there. And we're going to touch upon its gaming performance and talk about a little bit more about the setup and limitations about its gaming performance in the gaming section review, so do keep tuned. So other than that, going back in terms of the external device manager, of course you can see what else is connected and see if you've got anything that you want to add, for example, let's say a Bluetooth mouse or keyboard. So that's why the Bluetooth compatibility is also important. You've got AirPlay settings as well, and accessibility and smart features which you can enable or disable. Then you've got some support The most important factor over here is the fact that you can update in terms of over the air, and you can see right now I'm running on 1460 firmware version. You can even open up an e-manual directly from it. Ultimately, the menu is very comprehensive, easy to understand, although sometimes can be cumbersome when you want to get to a certain setting as fast as possible or enable or disable it regularly. There's no way of kind of pinning your favorite setting. And now let's get on to performance, and let's kick things off and talk about the sound quality. Now what I'm going to do is give you a bit of a demo. Look for the annotation at the bottom to know what mode it's playing in, and indeed if a soundbar is connected or not. The soundbar I have is the Samsung HW-N850. Now with that sound demo out of the way, and if you're interested in the song, by the way, it's from my friend called Priya. Her song will be down in the description below. You can hear it, subscribe to her, and of course purchase her song if you like it as well. Now in terms of the sound quality, what I will say that the TV speakers itself is actually, they're pretty good in my opinion. While they're not perfect, and of course they won't compete with a yesteryear's flagship soundbar, they are still very much competent to listen to. So therefore, if you're just listening to the news or let's say watching some podcasts and stuff like that, then it won't be an issue. The only problem is that if you are going to be watching movies or let's say watching something a bit more cinematic, then you're really going to want a dedicated soundbar. Now if you want some soundbar suggestions, do let me know in terms of where you live, in terms of territory, and also in terms of the price range that you're looking for in order what you want to spend, and I can give you my honest recommendations, be it from Samsung or other manufacturers out there which make some fantastic alternatives. Now the only thing to add to this is the fact that the TV's built-in speakers have object tracking. So if you don't have a compatible soundbar, then you might not benefit from this feature. If you do have a compatible soundbar, and that is Samsung's more later line that support the Q Symphony feature, it allows you to essentially synchronize the soundbar with the TV and essentially allow you to have a little bit of a better audio experience, because you'll be utilizing the TV speakers and the soundbar speakers, of course drivers, in order to get the most fullest amount of sound, if that makes sense. So this is something I can personally benefit from because I've got an older Samsung soundbar, but in this case I was still very much impressed by my soundbar's performance in comparison to the TV speakers. Now while sound is important, the most important factor is the actual picture quality. So let's get into it. Now the Samsung TV that I've got here, as I mentioned before, is a 55-inch model, so therefore it's a 55-inch screen, diagonally of course, and in this respect it's also got the quantum dot technology built in, so there's a QLED TV, and it's got HDR 2000 certification, which HDR 10 plus, and furthermore it's got 120 local dimming zones. Ultimately, this is a pretty competent TV when it comes to picture quality, to say the least. Of course, it being one of Samsung's flagship TVs, you'd expect that to come from the South Korean manufacturer. And I was pleasantly surprised after plugging in and playing around with some settings. I noticed that the image quality was spectacular. Now, of course, it depends on terms of what you're watching. As I showed you my settings and in terms of my setup, it is really dependent in terms of what you're going to be using the TV for. So if you're going to be looking for more sports, you might want to tinker around the settings in order to factor in, let's say, a bit of motion blur or say jitter reduction. If, however, you're someone who's just going to be watching the news or, let's say, watching some Blu-ray films, then you might want to tinker around in terms of using the movie setting instead of using the standard setting that I prefer using. It is very much dependent on you, but no matter which setting you use, you'll be very much impressed by the overall picture quality you get from the TV. And this is something that was kind of unsurprising to me. Having the Q9FN 55-inch Samsung TV is very much a successor in this respect, and this TV is, unsurprising, slightly better in its HDR performance. little bit better in terms of its gamut performance as well, and in terms of overall color accuracy, it's pretty stunning out the box without needing to calibrating or anything like that. Of course, you will get a better image if you can calibrate it, but most people don't have access to such equipment. So what I'm trying to say over here is that if you're coming to this TV looking for good picture quality, you're gonna get it. Now, the only thing to note over here, and while I can't compare it myself after reading certain people's opinions and reviews, and indeed looking at some of Samsung's competitors, there is of course OLED technology, namely from the likes of LG. Here, OLED technology will be far better at reproducing dark black scenes, and something that LCD LED technology, which is found in the 55-inch Q90 or Q95T, won't be able to ever reproduce purely because of the technology that it's using. That OLED technology is truly stunning when it comes to watching dark scenes, or indeed looking at scenes that really need that incredible contrast ratio. This is something the QLED does try to achieve and has become better over the years, but is still nowhere near in terms of producing that deep black tone. In other words, if you play a lot of Batman games, for example, you watch a lot of dark cinema, or indeed you're watching the TV in a lot of dark rooms, then you might benefit actually from buying an OLED in comparison to a QLED or an equivalent LED LCD TV, be it from Samsung or one of its competitors. That's just my 2 cents about it. Of course, you can agree or disagree, so let me know down in the comment section below. Now, one thing that can't be argued is its gaming performance. Now, before singing some praise about its input lag, I'm going to talk about one of its major limitations. If you remember, I said that it has 3 HDMI 2.0 ports and 1 singular HDMI 2.1 port. Now, the problem with this is that for those people who are fortunate enough to have, let's say, the latest generation PlayStation and Xbox and a modern day computer, all wanting to benefit from 4K 120 Hz, well, they'll have to chop and change the inputs each time they want to use one of these platforms. Because essentially using your HDMI 2.0 input on the TV, so in other words the other 3, will limit you to 4K 60 FPS or 1440p at 120 FPS. So this might not concern a lot of people, but for those people who are buying a flagship TV, one might have potentially expected 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs. Specifically, given some of Samsung's competitors, such as LG, offer 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs. And it would be nice to see the South Korean manufacturer also providing this on their flagship TV. So what I'm trying to say over here is that while it might not concern some people, it might be a deal breaker for others. Now, in my case, I don't own any console. Actually, the last console I had was the Xbox 360. It's ages old. And I have a PC. And in my PC, I've got an RTX 2080 Super, which is limited to an HDMI 2.0 input. As a result, I was able to hit 4K 60 FPS, or I was able to hit 1440p 120 FPS with HDR. And that is the latter mode that I chose to do my test. Speaking of which, what I did is launched up some Counter-Strike, one of the most competitive FPS shooter games ever made. And in this respect, input lag and response time of a panel, be it a monitor or a TV, are extremely important, to the point where if it's a slight milliseconds off, then you're not going to be picking the TV or, let's say, the monitor. In this respect, I was absolutely blown away by the input lag of this TV. Not only was it extremely competent, but it's probably one of the fastest TVs I've ever tested, making it actually suitable for competitive Counter-Strike. Now, I'm not going to suggest anyone playing at a competitive level, namely at the level I play at Global Elite, to be playing on a 55-inch Samsung TV. But nevertheless, it just gives you an indication that the TV is so impressive that you could potentially use it for even competitive games like Counter-Strike. So now, without trying to be silly, I ended up playing some more games that would seem a little bit more logical to play on a 55-inch TV. That was the likes of Destiny 2 and also in terms of FIFA 21. Both games are fantastic, although FIFA 21 does give you quite a lot of rage. What I will say is that both games performed very well. Furthermore, I enabled VRR, in other words, enabled G-Sync, which actually caught me by surprise. Normally, needing to enable G-Sync on a PC or on a PC monitor, you would often need a DisplayPort input. However, this didn't seem to be the case with the Samsung TV, and while it wasn't perfect, because I did notice certain flickering issues in certain scenes, it did ultimately mean I could run 1440p, 120Hz with HDR all running simultaneously together, which was pretty impressive. And here, with G-Sync activated, it meant I had a tear-free gaming experience, and that VRR range, which Samsung offer, is pretty spectacular. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say over here is that if you're a more casual gamer, you can benefit from the likes of AMD FreeSync or indeed NVIDIA G-Sync if you have a computer, or indeed you can benefit from the incredible HDR performance that this TV can provide you, or again, get the best sort of input lag and response time of this TV because it's extremely impressive. The only thing worth bearing in mind is the fact for you to benefit from the lowest input lag, the great response time, and even the faster refresh rate with VRR enabled, you have to enable game mode. And with game mode and input signal plus mode enabled, you do get a little bit of a degraded color performance. Is this a night and day difference? No. If you are a videophile or you like watching movies, then yes, it will make a difference, to the point where I would suggest disabling these modes when you're watching some movies. If, however, you're going to go into a game, or a serious game should I say, such as, let's say, Call of Duty, or you're playing some Counter-Strike, for example, enable these modes in order for you to benefit from that lower input lag and the excellent response time of this TV. So that's just my 2 cents of its gaming performance. What I'm trying to say over here, as for someone who's a pretty ultra competitive gamer and someone who would consider themselves as a little bit of a monitor geek and someone who loves reviewing monitors and indeed TVs, I would say that this TV is among one of the best gaming TVs you can potentially buy. And so this all leads me on to my verdict. What do I make about this Samsung Q90 or the Q95T TV? Well, truthfully, I think it's pretty obvious. This Samsung TV is a knockout performer. Across all the board, it does an excellent job. From its build quality, the amount of features that you get built in, and even in terms of its picture quality and even its sound quality. The thing which really did it for me is its gaming performance. And ultimately, this could potentially be seen as the best TV for gamers. Now, of course, not everyone's a gamer. So should you buy this TV if you're not a gamer? Well, yes and no. There are some alternatives you might want to consider. From the likes of Sony and LG, for example, and even Panasonic, there's some great TVs out there. And not only are they a little bit cheaper, or if not a little bit different in terms of what their performance offers, but furthermore, they might offer a different technology when it comes to their panel, and that might actually suit you best. For example, OLED technology. If you watch your TV in a dark room, then that will be far superior than buying a QLED TV. So, granted, this Samsung TV won't be for everyone, but for most average consumers who have the money, this QLED TV is a definite best buy. And as a result, well, gets the best buy award that I would award a product which, if I found was amazing, well, this is it. So that's my thoughts and my review of this TV. If you like this honest, unbiased, unpaid review, give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course favourite and share to help the channel grow. I've been Chris, take care and bye bye.